are spending, I'm not making this figure up, nor am I exaggerating it, we are spending $1 billion a month training the Afghan army. Training them. Nobody's training the Taliban, but they're actually doing rather well on the battlefield. We're spending $1 billion a month, and what are we getting for it? And you, of course, have now committed yourselves to continuing it despite the promise, solemn, I thought binding, promise. How foolish was I? I was just giving the Canadian government some credit a month or so ago that at least they had decided to withdraw from the occupation of Afghanistan, but that was another broken promise. This war is doomed. It will never succeed. I said in the speech I quoted earlier that if we handle this the wrong way, we'll make 10,000 new bin Ladens. Does anyone doubt that that's what we've done? By deepening the swamp of hatred and bitterness against us in Afghanistan and throughout the Muslim world, we've made probably not 10,000, maybe 100,000, maybe 1 million, maybe 10 million new bin Ladens. Because that's where these monstrosities are emerging from. They didn't come out of a clear blue sky. They came out of a swamp of hatred, watered by our double standards and our injustice towards the Muslim world, occupying Muslim countries, propping up the corrupt kings and the puppet presidents who rule the Muslim world almost without exception from one end to the other, all the while protesting that we're in favor of democracy and liberty. Somebody asked me on the television yesterday, what about the flawed election in Iran? Flawed it may have been, but at least there is an election in Iran. Who elected the kings and the emirs in the Arabian countries on the Gulf, who sell themselves in a pact with the devil? The devil keeps them in power, allows them to fill their pockets as long as they kick back most of it to the people who are keeping them in power. They talk about the punishment of prisoners and the treatment of women and human rights in Iran, whilst arming to the teeth Saudi Arabia, where there is no liberty or rights or elections or any kind of freedoms, and never has been. Our best friends in the region. You know, when I hear them talk about democracy in Afghanistan, in Iraq, I can't help remembering the election 4 years ago in Palestine. Because this siege that Sandra and her friends are going to help break on their boat was imposed for no other reason, look it up, than to punish the people of Palestine for voting in the only free, fair, democratic election ever held in any Arab country ever in history. The problem was they voted the wrong way, so far as the Western governments were concerned. That's the truth. That's why the siege was imposed. Now let me say, I've said it 10,000 times, let me say it 10,001 times. I am not myself a supporter of Hamas. If I had a vote in Palestine, it wouldn't be for Hamas. I don't support Hamas, but I do support democracy. And the only people entitled to choose the leadership of the Palestinian people are the Palestinian people themselves. Nobody else. Nobody else. Certainly not their occupier. You want their illegal occupier to choose the leadership of the Palestinian people? If you did want that, then you can't want peace, because you must know that choosing other people's leaderships can never lead to peace. All of the history of the colonial period and the decolonization under fire of the great empires is filled with examples of the settler states or the colonial powers trying to choose stooges and make deals with them to continue their authority and their rule. If you want to bring a conflict to an end, you have to talk to the people with whom you're in conflict. That's what we're doing in Afghanistan. We're actually practically begging the Taliban now to come and talk to us, because they're the people that we're fighting. If Senator George Mitchell had flown to the north of Ireland and announced that he was there for a peace process with the people with whom we were already at peace, everybody would have laughed. He went to the north of Ireland to talk to, negotiate with, make a deal with the people with whom the British state was in conflict. That's how international relations works. Only in Canada has there been a fetish erected that Hamas, the winners of that democratic election, can never be spoken to or acknowledged or dealt with. Well, I've got news for Mr. Harper. The British are already talking to Hamas. The Americans are already talking to Hamas through intermediaries. Even the Israelis are talking to Hamas through intermediaries. The day will come, and very soon, when everybody will be talking to Hamas, presumably except Stephen Harper and Jason Kenney, who'll still be worshipping their fetish. This is just stupid. And anyone who knows anything about international relations knows that it is stupid. Hamas, I'm asked by the Immigration Service whenever I arrive, although I'm not sure of the qualifications of the immigration officer to have a proper discussion about it. I'm asked in every interview, are Hamas a terrorist organization? They are not a terrorist organization, even though they're an organization that has practiced terrorism. Just like the African National Congress was not a terrorist organization, but did engage in some acts of terrorism. To put the full stop in the wrong place in the sentence leads nowhere. Mandela was not a terrorist, but the ANC carried out some terrorist acts. If you'd said, because it carried out some terrorist acts, it was a terrorist organization and therefore no one could deal with it, Mandela would still be on Robben Island and South Africa would not be free and be the multinational hope for the world that it is. It's just stupid politics to apply these kind of acid tests to very complex situations. Palestine cannot be liberated by Hamas alone, but it cannot be liberated without Hamas. A peaceful solution cannot be reached unless Hamas is a part of that solution. This is obvious to anybody who knows anything about international politics, about the history of these kind of conflicts. And that's because the Palestinian people will continue to resist what has happened to them by one means or another. They will continue to resist it. I joined this struggle more than 35 years ago. A midsummer day in 1975, I was alone in the Labour Party office in my Scottish city of Dundee. The doorbell was ringing. Eventually I answered it, and it was a young Palestinian student. I had never met an Arab, never met a Muslim, never spoken to anyone in my life about Palestine. He came in and spoke to me for 2 hours, at the end of which I was a signed-up member of the Palestinian resistance, and I will be until the last breath of my life. This is something that they should know. Joe made the point earlier about refusing to be intimidated. I say to the Jewish Defense League, to Jason Kenney and all the others, I'm not afraid of you. There is nothing I want from you. There is nothing I have that's of value to me that you could possibly take from me. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid only of God and the judgment day, when I will have to answer for my actions in the life that God gave me. The Palestinian people have now the support of the vast majority of people in the world. The vast majority of people in the world at least know that if there's no peace in Palestine, there can be no peace in the Muslim world, and if there's no peace in the Muslim world, there can be no peace on the earth, and that therefore a solution has to be found to the injustice that the Palestinian people have suffered. And as Joe put it, it's summed up in that slogan that rings across the world: no justice, no peace. It's not rocket science. You don't have to be Einstein to work it out. No justice, no peace. Now, what would justice mean? Well, the first thing it must mean is that the Palestinian people who were driven from their homes in their hundreds of thousands more than 60 years ago, and who are now generation after generation living in exile, the lucky ones here, the unlucky ones in rat-infested, rancid refugee camps, must have the right to return to their homes and their land. This is an absolute minimum term for any kind of solution. There's no point in doing a deal with anybody. If you can find one, maybe you can. There is no point in doing a deal with anybody that leaves this right unrequited. It is an inalienable right. It is a legal right. It is a moral right. It's a historic right. Forever. If somebody steals something from you, it remains yours, no matter how long the thief manages to hold on to it. So, there can be no justice which leaves the Palestinian people in exile in their camps or scattered to the four corners of the world. Their country wiped off the map. They're always talking about people threatening to wipe Israel off the map. They usually say that Ahmadinejad threatened to wipe Israel off the map, although